Life! Lightning! Bring my creature! Life!
You know that's not hooked up to anything, right?
Okay, dude, shut up, seriously! Hey, it's Jay, and it's time for me to talk about my fourth favorite film of all time, Young Frankenstein. This is a classic. This is one of the best comedies probably ever made on planet Earth ever. So without further ado, let's get into the plot. So the film's center is around Dr. Frederick Frankenstein, played by Gene Wilder. He wants it to be pronounced Frankenstein because he hates being associated with the Frankensteins, referring to the original Frankenstein who created the monster so many years before. So he insists to be called Frankenstein. He is married to Elizabeth, played by Madeline Kahn, and after the passing of his grandfather, he inherits his estate. So he makes his way to Transylvania to go see what his inheritance is like. And on the way there, he meets his bug-eyed hunchback assistant, Igor, or Igor, as he wants it pronounced, played by Marty Feldman, and also meets his young assistant, Inga, played by Terry Garr. So he finally makes it to the castle and is introduced to the castle's keeper, Frau Blucher. No, we're not going to do that joke every time I say her name, okay? And she's played by Cloris Leachman. So, yeah, everything's looking pretty creepy because this castle is giving off a very disturbing vibe that no one can quite pinpoint. So that night, after they all settle in, they hear a noise coming from inside the wall. This leads Frederick Frankenstein, Igor, and Inga to go down into, I guess, the depths of the castle after a secret passage behind a bookcase. And they discover Frederick's grandfather's private study. And he's able to read his notes, and this intrigues him to continue the work that his grandfather started in reanimating the dead. But first he needs a body. So he enlists the help of Igor to come and unearth a recently executed criminal. Like, he literally was just hanged by the town, and they need his brain. And they decide to go with a renowned name in the field. Hang on a sec. I forgot what his historian. He's a historian. I thought it was something like that, but I didn't want to say the wrong thing. So he's a historian named Hans Delbruck. Igor, being the bumbling fool that he is, gets scared by his own reflection and drops the brain, ruining it. He then picks up a jar that reads abnormal, and Igor ignores the fact that he's about to put this abnormal brain into a creature, a thing that is defying the laws of science. And Frederick Frankenstein unknowingly puts a defective brain in this defective creature. So only terrible things can come from this. So it seems as though after Frederick tries to reanimate the monster, it actually works. And the monster is played by Peter Boyle. And he gets it to walk his first step. He seems like he has it under control. But Igor lights a match to smoke a cigarette, and this sets the monster off. This sets it off. And almost strangles the doctor to death before he's sedated. While all this is going on, unbeknownst to the town, they are all very uneasy of the fact that there's a Frankenstein in their town, and they're afraid he might continue where his grandfather left off, because if you guys have seen the original Frankenstein, it doesn't end well for the town when Frankenstein is out on the loose. So they're afraid that, Chapter 2 might be happening with this new monster and this younger generation of Frankenstein. The Inspector, Kemp, played by Kenneth Mars, ensures the town that he's going to go visit Dr. Frankenstein to kind of just scope out the situation and make sure he's not actually reanimating a corpse. And, then it turns out that Frau Blucher releases the monster because this was her goal the whole time. She's the one who played the music to draw them down into the basement. She's the one who left the notes open to get him to continue her lover's work. It's revealed that Frau Blucher and Dr. Frederick Frankenstein's grandfather were in a relationship. So this isn't very good because we now have an unstable monster going around on the town, a town that's already weary of Frederick Frankenstein, and if he's going to continue with his grandfather's work. Now this monster, this broken monster, is running around the town with no one to control it, so it just went downhill really quick for our heroes here. So, with the monster roaming the countryside, he comes across a little girl and a blind man. I will go into why these scenes are so ingenious later on in the review portion of the video, but these are both references to the original Frankenstein. They're able to recapture the monster by drawing him in with violin music, which Frau Blücher has revealed that that's what calms him down, and they're able to bring him back into their custody. And Dr. Frankenstein is able to calm the monster down, get him to kind of chill out by praising him with his just immense, body, being strong, athletic, has the endurance of, a professional Olympic runner. So this is able to calm the monster down a bit, and he's actually able to get the monster to perform for a group of scientists. He has the monster dressed up in tux tails and a top hat, and they're able to perform Putting on the Ritz. It's a song, you guys should look it up. It's a pretty good song. But then a stage light explodes and scares the monster, which sends it into a tirade. The audience then proceeds to throw vegetables and fruit at it. How the audience just all of a sudden has trash to throw at the performer. It's that old cliche, which of course angers it even more because it's being embarrassed, and is able to be captured by the police and brought into custody. So to kind of comfort the situation, because obviously Frankenstein, he has now embraced his name as a Frankenstein. Dr. Frederick Frankenstein is being comforted by Inga, and to kind of relieve the tension of the situation, they do end up sleeping together on the reanimation table. I forgot to mention that Elizabeth is kind of the worst. Frederick is just ready to give her the world, and she's a socialite, and she's very prim and proper and kind of snobby, and she doesn't really give him the time of day. So no wonder, and I think you guys know what I mean by that, so no wonder he's able to just so quickly sleep with Inga to kind of calm his nerves about everything, because I think we all know that a romance is kind of forming between them. So the monster escapes from his chains in prison and goes out and actually kidnaps Elizabeth, who is now at the castle visiting Frederick. And so the monster kidnaps her, and Elizabeth starts to fall in love with this monster because of, in the words of Inga, yeah. So they're able to lure the monster back to the castle with violin music, and they're able to get it back into their custody, Frederick, Inga, and Igor's custody. And to stabilize this creature, Frederick decides to transfer some of his intellect into the brain of the monster. At the same time, an angry mob is formed, led by Inspector Kemp, and they storm the castle just as the transportation is being placed. And they destroy all the machines to try to stop him, and thankfully nothing fatal happens. But this causes the monster to now have clear thoughts, coherent sentences to kind of reason with the angry mob, and they realize that Frankenstein made this sacrifice to give this monster new meaning instead of just being this speechless, raging, thing that nobody understands. Now has thought and can, think for itself and everything like that. So all is forgiven, and Elizabeth ends up marrying the monster, and Inga and Dr. Frederick Frankenstein get married too. But where the monster is now very sophisticated in his dialogue, Frederick, in return, got a little bit more monstrous as Inga asks him, "What did you receive from the monster?" The movie ends with Frederick growling and unintelligibly, and then having sex with Inga. And Inga then proceeds to sing "Oh Sweet Mystery of Life," just like Elizabeth did after the monster kidnaps her. And they all live happily ever after, I guess, with Igor playing the trumpet on top of the castle. So that's Young Frankenstein, and oh boy, what a movie it is. Before I get into the review, I have two very high recommendations for you guys to make this experience even better for you guys. Watch Frankenstein, watch The Bride of Frankenstein, and this movie will become 50,000 times funnier. It's already funny on its own, but if you've seen those two movies, you'll get why a lot of these scenes are so great. Excuse me. The little girl and Frankenstein, if you guys have seen the original Frankenstein, you know what happens to the little girl, and it's a very tragic and traumatic scene. So when she asks him, what should we throw in now? And he just kind of looks at the camera like, I don't even want to answer that question. It's so much funnier because you know what they're alluding to. And hands down, one of the most creative parodies of the past movies is The Blind Man, played by Gene Hackman. So I told you he visits the blind man, and in the movie, it's the same setup. The blind man is a very lonely man who lives alone, and has no one's come to visit him. He has nobody to visit him, and it's a very sad character. And finally, the monster shows up, and it's a very touching dynamic, even in the parody movie, because think about it this way. You have two misunderstood people. You have someone who's blind, so he can't see like you or I, so he's outcasted. And of course you have Frankenstein, who has so many different reasons why it's outcasted, and they kind of bond. Of course fire ends up setting them off, but it's actually really touching when it's like Frankenstein finally finds somebody who's just as misunderstood as him. But young Frankenstein takes it to the max and keeps focusing on the blindness of Gene Hackman, and he messes up. He pours food all over the monster, breaks his cup because he can't see, and accidentally lights his thumb on fire when he's trying to light up a cigar. Just classic stuff like that. But if you watch the original, it'll just be even more funny than what it is right now. But it's still a touching scene because, again, they're both misunderstood creatures. And nothing's more beautiful than when two misunderstood creatures come together and can, talk about their differences and why they're so ostracized. So just fantastic scenes like that. Great parodies. I love the performances by everybody in this movie. Of course, Gene Wilder was a fantastic actor, and he killed this role. He was able to capture the insanity and the drive that Frankenstein would have. I love Igor as the monster. Their little exchange at the beginning when he's talking about how his name is Frederick Frankenstein, and Igor's like, it's pronounced Igor. I love that exchange so much. Fun fact for any of you guys who are a fan of like early 2000s memes, the dramatic prairie dog meme, that soundbite that plays when the prairie dog turns around is actually from this movie when they first reveal Frankenstein's castle. So that's a little bit of a fun fact for you guys. As you guys know, this film was made by Mel Brooks, and he's a fantastic director. He did a couple more movies like Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs, but I think this has got to be his best work, hands down, because everything just hits home so well. All the jokes, they knock them right out of the park with something as subtle as werewolf, and then Igor starts talking like, their wolf, their castle, like subtle jokes like that, to the bigger jokes like the blind man, like the little girl, like Elizabeth putting her hair up like the Bride of Frankenstein and making hissing noises like the Bride of Frankenstein does in the original movies. Things like that, they all just work so well in this film. And there's so many comedic characters. I love Inspector Kemp, whose German accent is so thick that even fellow Germans can't understand what he's saying half the time. And it's hilarious how they're able to work that out. when they do putting on the Ritz, it's just such a random thing to be doing because they first just start out with doing simple things like walk heel to toe, simple things like that, then walk backwards, and all of a sudden they're just singing putting on the Ritz. It's like, where did that come from? They're just, all these jokes, they just work very, very well. And you have to pay attention because there are jokes that you can miss if you're not really paying attention. I'm not going to go into every single joke so you guys can have some fresh jokes to look forward to, but I'm just letting you guys know now, pay attention to everything that's going on. Listen, don't look away because there's some visual gags. Yeah, so much to say about this film in so little time. Young Frankenstein deserves to be in the top 5 of my list. It deserves to be watched by a lot of people, especially if you're a fan of parody, if you're a fan of comedy, if you're a fan of the original Frankenstein movies, which, again, I recommend you watch because it'll just enhance the experience so much more. Yeah, there's just so much to this film, and definitely, hands down, no questions asked, Mel Brooks' strongest. So with that, I've come to my final verdict, and the final verdict for this movie is going to be an extremely enthusiastic, for the first time on my channel, a 5 out of 5 stars. Doesn't mean it's perfect. There are some flaws in the movie, namely pacing issues, but it's really, the complaints are so minute that it doesn't take away from the whole experience. There hasn't been a pacing issue where I was like, oh wow, this ruined the whole movie for me. No, it still feels fresh, still feels amazing, even with those tiny little pacing issues. There are a couple things that they maybe could have cut short, but excuse me, I'm not going to hold that against the movie. It's still an extremely solid watch, and I highly recommend it to you all. Make sure you guys stay tuned next week for my first 2-in-1 review. I'm going to be reviewing both the It movies at the same time. I'll explain how that's going to happen, well, when you guys are watching the video. Until next time, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends so I get more views on this channel. I really want to get it to grow a little bit more. And obviously subscribe, hit the bell icon so you get notified when I upload my 2-in-1 review of It Chapters 1 and 2. And until next time, guys, that is a wrap.